Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. Here you can grow your knowledge about marketing operations, listen to ideas and strategies to help you scale, grow, and optimize your efficiency, drive your speed to market, and enrich your work life. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. I'm Glenn Bottomley, and today my guest is Jason Knaggs, Marketing Operations Manager at BECU, the Boeing Employees Credit Union, one of the top 5 largest credit unions in the United States. Thanks for joining me today, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Glenn.
Well, listen, I was fascinated to learn just how large and successful BECU is. And you had mentioned to me earlier that BECU formed in 1935, and that while it originated as a financial institution for Boeing employees, today it's a wholly separate entity from Boeing and is now, as I mentioned, one of the top 5 credit unions in the country. Asset sizes of 30 billion, and I believe you have 1.3 million members. That's amazing. So can you just share a little bit more about your early career experiences and how those prepared you for your current leadership role in marketing operations at BECU?
Absolutely, Glenn. It is crazy. BECU, originally Boeing Employees Credit Union, did have to be a Boeing employee at the beginning, but that's not the case now. We're open to any Washington state and some surrounding areas for members to join. So my early career, I was lucky to be able to work a wide number of jobs, kind of started at about working at the age of 15, had a number of varied positions. I mean, I worked as a whitewater rafting guide, ski school, museum, docent, so actually giving tours. So I say all of that because I found that I really liked working with people. I knew that from the beginning, that I really liked those kind of jobs that interacted heavily with people. And what I found in my college, kind of ending college days, is I really liked operational stuff, things that blended both working with people and operations. So I was director of a ski school and really enjoyed, we had big programs. I really liked looking at how we faced some organizational issues when it came to these big programs, and finding ways to work through that, streamline it, working with people. I worked at a food cooperative that introduced me to the cooperative model that credit unions operate under. So I had an understanding, of kind of that business model. But again, there, I focused on inventory management and operations of herbs and spices, actually, of all things. And after that, I worked in the nonprofit sector at Big Brothers Big Sisters, held a few different positions there. One of the last ones was coordinating a donation center where we actually had bins that we collected clothing and household items as a fundraising entity, and again did the operations of that. So I got very lucky in a lot of ways with my position at BECU. When I came on about 8 years ago, they were really looking for someone to fill a position that kind of covered a broad number of supporting different aspects. I initially started in more of the event, financial education, supporting our PR team, and again, slowly found that I really liked the operational stuff, and we had some processes and systems that we wanted to improve in the marketing area. So I just kind of luckily gravitated towards that as being one of the areas that I focused on there.
That's fantastic. What a great background. And even as you shared that history, there were elements that I could see in every one of those experiences where, you sort of picked up along the way those, rich experiences that would prepare you for what you're doing now in marketing operations. So thanks so much for sharing that background. One of the things that I thought was interesting when you and I first connected was something actually on your LinkedIn profile, and it was sort of a buzzword of sorts, but you were really focused on change management. And you had a quote there, and it said, if you want to change something, you really have to get involved in the system. And that really struck me. So how do you get involved in the system and implement change? And how have you found the best way to get others to sort of jump on board with those changes?
Yeah, in general, if I'm looking to try and lead some kind of change initiative, I will typically really want to get into the system. By that, I mean live what's currently happening in that, right? So for our creative operations, for example, when I was really doing a lot of work on significantly changing that, before doing that, I was actually going through the process, doing real campaigns and feeling, okay, this is what is going on now. I'm going through the process. So I think it can be difficult while you can bring in outside or, just ask questions. I just really believe that any way that you can find for yourself to actually kind of go through that process is really beneficial. So that's what I did there. Also, you know, involving other people, as I think you said with that too. I definitely didn't approach wanting to change that process of like, okay, I'm going to go in there and figure it out myself and, come up with my plans of what it should be. We did a lot of working sessions where kind of incorporating some of that change management of stakeholders, identifying some key people that were both really excited about seeing the process change, maybe some that were neutral, maybe some that were opposed to it. And we actually went through a number of working sessions where we captured, even before doing anything, what's working well, what do we want to make sure that we keep, what are our pain points, what are kind of must-haves as we look to change this, and what are optional things. And yeah, really involving a key group of people, and as much as possible bringing in others along the way, so that it doesn't just feel like a change that's being inflicted on people. You're going through the change together, and people have voices in it. So
Hmm. Your comments about going through the experience that a customer goes through really resonate with me because, whether you're a technology company or creating software or a product, actually experiencing it and going through that journey that a customer would experience. What's the application process? What is the onboarding process? Determining what those key relevant journeys are for your buyer, for your customer, and then putting yourself in that exact seat and to experience exactly what do they see, what is the customer touch points that they are going through. Those are some of the best ways, I think, that to your point, to really dig in to understand what is that journey like. And I have just found for myself in my own career that it's when you do that, you undoubtedly find that was a little jarring, or there's some friction there, or that's not maybe maybe the most optimal way to phrase that. So everything from whether it's the marketing, the creative, or the operational side of the journey, I think there's a lot of truth to the value of seeing how a customer is actually experiencing your brand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Now, we talked a little bit about marketing. We talked a little bit about creative. And I know that one of the things that you are super passionate about is both on the marketing and creative side, but specifically is that you have been incorporating Agile and specifically the Agile software development principles into some of your marketing and creative processes. And so that's really unique. So what would you say is, where did that passion for sort of continuous improvement and this passion for Agile, where did that originate from?
That's a great question. I think to start, the kind of as we've talked about previous jobs and just liking operations and processes in general, finding that interest is one. Specifically at BECU, I remember it was probably back in about 2017. I have a colleague there that's in the IT space or supports more of that was really wanting to, it was back when Agile and a lot of those principles weren't, I don't want to say they were new, but our organization, they were somewhat newer to the organization and kind of limited to the IT tech space. And I remember she organized a trip actually to a furniture uh, company here in the Puget Sound area that is really focused on kind of the lean Kaizen, I think it is, principles. We actually did a field trip there and they talked about how they're actually assembling furniture items, but they showed how they are always striving to continuous improvement and making stuff visible. And that just resonated with me and kind of I think we were talking about it, but specific to a lot of the work that I do on the marketing front does have to do within BC with our creative operations. And also a lot of event planning got us thinking, how can we incorporate these principles, these ideas into what we do, even though we're not IT. um, we thought there was value in what they were doing. So there were kind of two things that happened. We did, for our event planning, we really did do kind of I forget the exact names of stuff, but kind of a lean, swim lanes, upcoming work, doing, done, and then what we call done, where it was actually like really closed out, not going to pop back up. So we started doing some just kind of playing around with different systems and making it work for us. I incorporated some stuff from previous roles that had worked well with how we actually set it up on physical boards with sticky notes and kept it simple to start with.
Sort of like a Kanban,
Yeah,
yep.
yep, exactly. And sorry, that's more the event side, but yeah, that was a true Kanban. On the marketing side, thought there because our normal creative process kind of follows a waterfall approach where, it starts, you go into copy, you go into compliance, and then it goes into design and then design compliance. And there's kind of a path, but the issue, so to say, is it doesn't always work that clean, right? You could have one project that just moves through every step in the way if it's small and is relatively easier. But if you're doing a huge campaign, it might take a lot of iterations of copy and feedback and design. So basically, along the way, I'd been introduced to the concept of Agile, Scrum, and we just kind of started playing around with how, starting with our swim lanes, here's kind of the key stuff we want to capture. Here's outlined a way that it might kind of flow through and work. And yeah, just kind of went from there. I hope that's answering what you're looking for on
Yeah,
that one.
totally. Yeah, no, it's great. And I think that, you know, I think that there's a great deal of interest in agile marketing to today, and how do you actually incorporate it? Have you found that, you know, on the creative side, have you found any pushback in terms of the in trying to incorporate agile into the creative process, or is there a broad embrace of that?
Yeah, that's a real funny question. Yeah, yes and yes. There was initially some amount of light, not pushback, but you're changing something, and it was uncomfortable for some people. And it's kind of funny. One of the stories that I like around that is I remember at the beginning, I had set up what I thought the process might look like, and I had called the meeting together where we were going to go through and just try to walk the path, right, of what it was going to look like. And I remember that I was using actual product line examples. So I had, let's say, an auto example and a mortgage and a checking. And I just remember that day this meeting didn't quite go how I wanted to, because instead of focusing on the process, we were getting really caught up on the kind of ultimate stakeholders, where I would hear somebody say, "Oh, this is never going to work for the auto team. Oh, the mortgage team isn't going to like this." And we weren't trying to focus on that. So I remember just this day, it was not going well. We all went home, and I'm like, okay, I need to really get at walking this path and not getting so caught up in these examples. So I decided to do Star Wars themed things for the next day. So I actually took out all of our real examples, and our stakeholders were now Star Wars characters. We were working on totally fake Star Wars themed projects. And so the next day we came in, and it was like, walk the path. And we're not going to get caught up on, if you're concerned about Yoda not liking something, we'll give you C3PO. He's a robot. Like, it's fine. And it was actually kind of fun. That's one of the things I try to do too when doing this thing, is have some fun with it, right, when possible. And I found that in a way, I think really did help people take out really focus in on the process. And I think that doing that example and seeing it and walking through what we were thinking about kind of got people on board even more so. And then the first few weeks, especially, we really intentionally, we set up front, this is a change. We went from having weekly meetings, stuff really wasn't visible. We set up essentially daily meetings to start. And we said, this is going to short term feel probably a little bit rough. It's going to take up a little bit more time than normal. And um, we would do that every day, and it did. It took longer. And at the end of the week, every Thursday, we decided we wouldn't do it on Fridays. Every Thursday, intentionally after that day's stand-up meeting, we would take the time to check in with everybody. What's working well with this? What are people struggling with? What isn't going well? What recommendations are out there? And again, continuing to evolve what we were doing based on that feedback, and showing people, hey, it's totally fine. Speak up. If this is painful for you, you're probably not the only one. And even if you are, speak up about it. And also, let's highlight what is really going well with this. And I think from that, it was really exciting, because it did feel like we were probably one of the first teams outside of IT that were really using these approaches. You would walk around the office before that and not see whiteboards or see processes at all. And then within the next year after us doing that, you saw a lot more boards and a lot more swim lanes and a lot more of the methodology to show, hey, this is not limited to IT and tech. Yeah, so.
No, that's excellent. Well, and back to the Star Wars, of course. Star Wars, my favorite movie and franchise. Absolutely love Star Wars, but I think that there's tremendous brilliance in what you did there, because I would imagine, particularly when trying to introduce a fundamental change in how you're doing marketing, or any sort of process shift, that if you bring an actual product or a service offering to the forefront, and if that's what you're actually talking through, every single person is going to now be encumbered with the understanding of what that product or process is, or what that service is. Well, we can't do that. I've got this constraint. No, we can't do that, etc. But by changing it, to your point, to this is just Yoda or C3PO, etc., it sort of removes all of those encumbrances, where you're just saying, if we had this type of process, or if we had this type of product, or this type of offering, what would be the right way to do that from a process perspective? So that's just, I think, a really great approach that you introduced there. So well done.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was a lot of fun. And it's not to say, definitely there are valid concerns and constraints and all of that on product and service lines. But when you're just focusing on the heart of the process, I did find that in this particular case, an approach like that helped not get bogged down in all the what ifs and what about this person or this group.
Hmm.
So.
And how long ago did you implement Agile to your marketing and creative?
Yeah, I think in a dedicated way. I'm trying to remember now. We were very lucky in it was pre-pandemic. I want to say the kind of big shift happened maybe in late 2017,
Okay.
where at that time the first process created was for quite a while, actually, all using, like I was saying with the event side, we were using a physical whiteboard, sticky notes. It was all very manual, and luckily we had found that the process was working. On the whole, people liked it, but obviously there were new challenges. With actually one of the biggest challenges was sticky notes falling off of the board, right? Silly things that come up. So we had a push in 2018 to actually digitize the process to see if we could. Now we've got it on the board, can we set it up so that we can access it digitally? Because even then sometimes people would join remotely or not be able to make it, just so we could access it all the time. So we had kind of the first push was 2017. 2018 was the digitizing it, which was unique. It wasn't quite, it was a change, but it wasn't as fundamental. We were keeping a lot of the same processes, and that actually let us open up um, incorporating automations and doing some things to speed it up, or to not, yeah, just digitizing it. We were ready at that point to use a tool to improve it and make it digital. So that happened 2018, 2019. So luckily, by and large, as far as our creative team goes, when the pandemic hit and our brand strategy and the teams that are involved in this process, it was a pretty easy change to be fully virtual and remote.
So in those roughly 5 years or so that you've been using Agile, uh, I think when people think of Agile, they'll think of Lean or Scrum or Scrumban or certifications and all of the sort of the processes that go along with it. You mentioned the swim lanes, iterations, daily stand-ups, poker planning, sprint reviews, retrospectives, etc. So what advice would you give to make sure that other marketing operations executives who are wanting to incorporate Agile, how do you make it so that the process doesn't get too heavy, so that it starts to impact project velocity or adoption of strategies and so forth within the organization?
That is a great question. I would say from my perspective, um, one, it's not necessarily getting too bogged down in following an exact path, right? So we do call our process the marketing scrum, digital scrum process, but I would not make a claim to, if there's somebody listening that's a, certified scrum master and all of that, there's probably a number of things that we don't do, right? Scrum, I think, is generally 2-week iterations and all of that. So I guess what I would say is definitely learn about all those different methodologies. I think that there's value in and depending on the project, obviously, but there's value in all of them. And really, instead of getting bogged down on following a specific one to the T, incorporate the best practices of them. I tend to blend them up a little bit without going too crazy, but I would say that just start somewhere, start small when possible. I think I saw one of your other podcasts talking about simplicity. I do like that of just start with kind of the core needs with a basic principle, whether it be the swim lanes were kind of ours, and that again that waterfall methodology, and incorporate what makes sense from practices to what you're trying to do. And uh, I would also say, although it feels like it's been a while with especially our creative operations, where I personally have been involved, um, of changing it in a fundamental way, being open, making it clear we're trying to build something, but it right now, if somebody had a great idea or a recommendation in that, we can tweak it. So you're not just trying to build something, it's not a house where it's going to stay that way forever. You're open to incorporating based on practices and checking in with teams. So
Yeah, you're
I would say it's that. Just don't be afraid to start. Don't get too bogged down in a single methodology necessarily. And
and see what works, see what
yep,
works, and
exactly.
modify, feedback loops, loop back, and if it's working, great, keep going down that path. If you've got to make some changes, make those changes. So I
Absolutely.
love that. Now, in your current role at BECU, I know that you're actually leading even more than just marketing operations. So I know you're involved in PR, things like internal communications, financial education. You mentioned event marketing, et cetera. So how do you find that the breadth of your responsibilities, how is that impacting sort of your day-to-day marketing operations activities?
Yeah, my role at BECU is, I would say, kind of unique. I generally wouldn't say that I necessarily lead any of those particular things. I'm kind of a support across our division, which includes marketing, and that's a whole bucket of group and executives and leaders focused on different things. And then so I support different aspects there. I support our events, financial education. The actual team I'm on is actually social impact financial education. Um, so I am really kind of a broad support across the division, and that can definitely be challenging in ways, and it tends to, I would say, the way I navigate it is trying to plan and get in front of stuff as much as possible, right? The marketing operations, the creative process, I actually feel very happy that a day to day, I wouldn't say that that's actually something I'm overly involved with. We have a whole team that runs that. I remember being so happy 2 years ago. There was something that I thought I had this great idea and was going to come in and actually not do what I was talking about. I wanted to make a change myself, and I actually had a colleague who I really respect there who said pretty bluntly, butt out. We know this better. We're on it. We're doing it. You don't and that actually made me really happy to see that other teams, it resonated with them and they had the skills to improve processes. Um, but sorry, I'm digressing a little bit. Yeah, I think that it's just for me trying to plan ahead, um, have teams, or big events or other stuff that I'm supporting. If I know about it ahead of time, that just kind of helps me with time management. Of course, stuff will come up at the last second, and kind of like with our Scrum Kanban processes, you just have to fit it in and decide, is this going to actually bump something else, or can this be another team that takes it on?
Yep. Excellent, excellent stories there. Now, let's shift a little bit from process and let's shift to characteristics. So one of the things that you've talked about in the past is about resolve in the context of business. So, and I know you've talked a bit about this on LinkedIn, but so can you expand on that a little bit more? And what are some things that you have found that helps to build resolve? And do you have any sort of stories, about that in business?
Yeah, and I think I remember the post you're talking about. When it comes to resolve, I think it kind of gets back to what I was saying earlier of, we need to be able to take calculated risks on things, and um, as much as we can plan things out and think that we have the best plans and strategy, things will come up. But I feel that if you create a culture where within boundaries, right? Like there's obviously risks that are too risky that you don't want to take. But if you can call out, I remember we had one time where an event just had a major mishap with a lunch of all things, and it was essentially a failure, right? And I remember talking to the executive I report up to and had said, we need to call this out as a failure, but we need to show that is okay. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it maybe wasn't pleasant for some people, but we worked through it and ultimately got to a good spot, and we can now bring those learnings forward. And I think that that's what I think of with resolve of, try things out, plan them out to the best of your ability, know that issues will come up, but in general, that's okay, and you can work through those issues. And by doing that, by actually having instances where you have failures and can accept and call it out, show that it's okay, and learn from it and improve, creating that culture is just going to help in the long run on a lot of things. So I found it brought a lot of I have a lot of respect for my leadership at BECU, but this executive in particular, that helps even more respect. Like already had a lot of respect for him, but just showing like, hey, this we knew we were taking a chance on this. It burned us a little bit, but that's okay. And there was the other example, there was an event, I think on that LinkedIn post that I was talking about. We had an event with some thousand high school students, and it was in a convention center. And I just remember there were so many moving parts with that event and things that could go wrong. And little things that did pop up, but again, we were able to, in the moment, quickly pivot. We knew that we had that supportive leadership. We knew in the end it would work out. And I remember another former coworker just at a certain point in the middle of the day when we didn't know if it was going to work out at all, she was literally jumping up and down saying, it's working. And it just built, we all shared that excitement, and it was a great team bonding moment to see that, we kind of stuck with it, worked through stuff, and helped create a real high functioning team.
Oh, what's
So.
some great stories there about building resolve and the focus, the dedication, the willingness to fail. All of that. I mean, I think those are wonderful. Thank you for sharing those.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Jason, before we wrap up today's episode, what is the main takeaway that you want to leave our audience with in understanding the challenges facing marketing operations executives today?
Oh, that one's a little tricky because, like I said, I'm not an executive myself, so I don't want to speak on behalf. But what I would say from what I see and hear talking about is, again, getting back to just being willing to try out new things, like we were just talking about. Start simple, build out those processes. Another thing that does come up a lot is actually balancing bureaucracy versus the other end of the spectrum. And we didn't really get into that here, but that's a big thing that comes up for me, and that I think by creating these type of systems, keeping them simple, working with people, being able to focus on kind of the larger impact, that you can incorporate agile practices into marketing. And I think ultimately they do help with those type of challenges. And yeah, I guess just have the courage to try it out, and great things can happen with it.
We'll leave it right there. Well, this wraps up this episode of The Art of Marketing Operations. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having me. It was great, great sharing.
Likewise. Well, until next time, stay safe, take care, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to The Art of Marketing Operations, brought to you by Taylor. Don't forget to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and share. Until next time.